showtime. Welcome to the show. I'm Brent, Holland, and welcome to Night Fright. Let me read this off the back of our guest's book. The world's ecosystems have been destroyed by genetic pollution, and cities have evolved into mega malls. That's right. Budgie is a knife-wielding, brass-knuckled young man from the impoverished and brutal red section of Toronto's T-Dot Centre. That's right, folks. This book takes place in Toronto in the future, and that's what we're going to be discussing tonight, the future and the possibilities that it holds. And what's our society going to look like in the future? That's where we're going to go tonight. When his best friend is murdered and Budgie falls in love with the woman responsible, twists and turns, he learns that there's more to life than drugs, blood, or money. To escape his past, he must give up everything and everyone he knows and sell his perceptions to an enigmatic and dangerous gang leader, fighting for survival and unwittingly involved in a scheme that only he can stop. Budgie must ask himself, does he want to? Technicolor Ultramall is an ultra-violent science fiction dystopic novel about the value of being human in a completely commodified world. Strap in and hang on, folks. This is going to be a wild one. Here we go.
There is a time to question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Welcome, one and all. I want to welcome our guest, Ryan Oakely, tonight. He's the author of Technicolor Ultramall, and this is a book that's set in Toronto in the future. And right away, I have a question for Ryan. Ryan, about the Maple Leafs in the future.
No playoffs. I'm much more of a baseball fan, but I can't see the Maple Leafs being anywhere, future far or near.
See, that was the question, the first question that came to mind. What about the Leafs? Now, everybody...
I'm pretty sure that's when the four horsemen of the apocalypse
are going to arrive.
In the Stanley Cup.
Ryan's joining us live from Toronto tonight. As the rest of Canada knows, it is the center of the universe, as we like to jest. I like Toronto. I'm one of those few Canadians that actually likes Toronto, even though I herald from Montreal originally, spent some time in Sudbury, and now in Kingston, Ontario. Okay, let's get into the book. Go ahead, please.
I like Toronto too, actually, though you probably wouldn't be able to tell it from the book.
They don't use it to draw tourists into the city?
No, it's not. It hasn't been. The government hasn't put it up on any posters or anything yet.
Let's go into your world, your perceptions of Toronto in the future. Can you give, without giving anything away, can you give us all a little bit of a brief synopsis of the book?
Well, basically, it's a story of a society that's evolved completely into malls and the people that live in it. It deals with how people relate to each other in enclosed spaces and how they relate to each other in sort of a hyper-capitalist network. It's very class-based, it's very violent, and people value each other basically based on what they can do for each other, and nothing is free. So I would say it's very much like the Toronto of today.
So it is set today, but I was going to ask you that. You're drawing on social issues that I suspect you feel very strongly about that are happening right now, right across the globe, I would say, and you're projecting them into the future. How do you do that? Please, go ahead.
So that's one of the things that attracts me most to science fiction is that it allows for sort of a satirical element that I don't think realism does so well, or horror or fantasy or any other genre element. If you put things into the future, it gives you a really good tool for talking about the present. So what I tried to do was look at the world around me, and instead of extrapolating into the future, more exaggerate the present. Just turn up the volume.
Okay, I understand. Why the future? Why Toronto? I mean, that's got to be one of the forefront questions right away, so we can set up that context, and then we'll go into the details.
Okay. The future for me is just about the best tool for discussing the present. When you discuss the present, you're too close to it to see what's really going on a lot of the times. Quite often you need that little bit of remove in order to see it, just the same way that you can't look at yourself without a mirror. The future kind of holds up that mirror. As far as Toronto goes, it's a city I live in, so I could set it somewhere else, but I wouldn't know much about that city. I wouldn't know the details.
Now, is Toronto kind of a metaphor for all, or a symbol also for the rest of the cities in the world? Will all cities be encompassed by malls?
Yeah, I think already we're seeing a tendency for the world to become more of a monoculture. Cities are becoming more and more alike. If you go to a McDonald's in London, England, or in San Jose, Costa Rica, or in Toronto, it's the same McDonald's, it's the same burger. There's not, the differences are being erased. I read an interesting article just the other day in Psychology Today about how people tend to regret buying objects more than buying experiences. The reason being that experiences are seen as being unique, whereas objects are mass-produced. But I think we're moving towards a society where experiences are mass-produced. If you take a vacation to any city in the world, I think you'll find pretty much the same things that you'll find in any other city. We're losing uniqueness as time goes on.
Folks, we're speaking with Ryan Oakely tonight. We're talking about his book that's set in Toronto in the future. It's called Technicolor Ultra Mall, and this is where Toronto has become a giant mall, if you will. Now, I'm gonna make some jests here, of course, about you have a wife and I have a honey, and they love shoes. So that might not be okay. So that might not be a bad thing for some people.
I am from Toronto, after all.
We're doing this via Skype. He's in Toronto right now. Actually, Ryan, I was going to ask you. It's breaking a little bit. Can you just make sure all your apps are off? If you have Internet Explorer running or email, just turn them off. Skype, folks, is all about bandwidth. Good analogy is a hose, if you will, a backyard hose full of water. If you start poking holes in it, by the time it gets to the end, the pressure is not as strong. And the more things you turn off with Skype, the less it has those holes to escape into. So there we go. Easy way to get his book, as always, folks. www.nightfrightshow.com. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest book cover. That'll take you right to a place where you can order the book from the comfort of your own chair, armchair, as I like to say. Let's go back to Ryan. Now we're talking about the social implications that are going to take place in the future. Is there anything good that's going to happen in the future? Is it all bad? Is it all doom and gloom?
I think I'm quite optimistic about the future right now, actually. That's not to say that it will be an easy ride. And I'm not optimistic about the system that we currently live in, the kind of corporatist system. I think that's going to collapse. I think it is collapsing. I think it might be a bloody, dangerous ride on the way down as it tries to preserve itself. But I do think that there is something better coming up. I think I have a lot of faith in the kids. Basically, I like that they're trying to build something with the Occupy movement, and that they're actually active in a way that I don't think my generation was when we were their age.
What do you think will replace what's in place right now? In terms of, let's go through the gamut. Let's start off with government then. What will replace the current form of government? Democracies, republics?
Well, I'm hoping that the nation state will shrink down to being about as relevant as the church is now. There's still some people who believe in it, but if you looked at how people primarily identified themselves a few hundred years ago, it'd be, Protestant, Catholic, and those identifications still exist. And I'm hoping the nation will shrink down to that level. I think what will replace a lot of these things is basically abundance. Once you get into 3D printing, it really undermines capitalism. The same way that being able to download movies and download books and all of that makes them worth less. When you can download and print actual physical objects, you don't really need as many government grants. You don't need as much assistance. The function of government and of money will change drastically. I think it'll be much reduced.
But would that not hinder an individual's voice to a certain extent? I always thought government was in place to serve the people, we the people, as they say. They are our, I hesitate to use the word servants. It's like having a small business and they work for us. And I think far too often people forget that relationship. And I think that's the problem. I think people aren't active enough to sustain a democracy.
You see, when I look at a democracy, though, what I see is a very primitive system, and it's one that's based on there not being very good communication. For example, in my neighborhood, we elect an MP, and he travels to Ottawa to represent me, or to represent the community. Now, this made sense. It makes sense if you look at it in a society where you can't get to Ottawa, and you need to find a trusted member of the community to go up and speak to Ottawa on your behalf and represent your interests. However, today, chances are you don't really know your MP, you don't hang out with him. He's not someone whose character you can really vouch for. And the other thing is that you can communicate with Ottawa, or you can communicate with people all over the world. I think our voice is growing. In the sense that you can talk to more people, reach more people than ever before, but you can't. But I feel like our political representation is shrinking at the same time. I think if you talk to most Canadians, you'll find a lot of them don't feel very well served by their government, that for one reason or another, that their taxes aren't spent well, that they're paying too many of them, that the services they want to see aren't provided, and that it's sort of a con game,
So you think people are feeling less and less empowered?
Yeah, I do. I think they're feeling more empowered, but less empowered by the political process, which is what's creating a lot of the conflict right now. They haven't seen the political process increase in responsiveness to the same degree that the rest of their lives have. They can communicate. I can communicate with people in Egypt, Bahrain, but it still is quite difficult to get a hold of my own prime minister.
Well, sure, I understand. And if he took the time out to speak to 34 million Canadians every day, he'd still be dealing with that on a daily basis. So yeah, there has to be some sort of distribution system, I suspect, in terms of how you get your message across. And I think the political system, albeit it is not perfect, it is certainly better than communism, is certainly better than what's taking place in Iran right now. Socialism as well, right across the board. We're speaking with Ryan Oakely. We're talking about some new ideas, folks, that are incorporated in his book called Technicolor Ultra Mall. Easy way to get the book, folks, as always, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover, and that's going to take you right to a spot where you can order this book from the comfort of your own home. And the book takes place in future Toronto. And no, folks, if you're wondering, no cup for the Maple Leafs. But, it's not so bad. I'm a Habs fan. So, also, I want to point out something. I want to thank my nephew. My nephew was in town here in Kingston. He's thinking about going to Queen's. He brought me a McGill mug. He's just about to finish his undergrad, and I've got another nephew. Oh, it's great. And I got another nephew in Stanford. Tyler, if you're listening, I would like a Stanford mug as well. And I have another nephew in high school getting straight A's, so I'm really proud. Obviously, they didn't get the smarts from me. We're moving on. Ryan, let's go back to this train of thought. Now, these social conditions, how do they evolve in your book? What takes place inside this conglomerate mall? Is it ultimate consumerism?
Yes, it is. To the point where people are seen as products as well. There's a lot of prostitution. There's sort of, the gangs are ranked according to how much money they're worth to the gang members are ranked according to how much money they're worth to the gang. Everything is basically translated into the common language of money and advertisement. It goes to, personal branding is a component in that. As far as how the city evolves from this point to that. The idea was not that they just sat down and built a giant mall, but that it was very much an evolution. As consumerism cranked up, the outside world got more and more difficult to inhabit. The same way that our summers get hotter, so we have more air conditioning, which contributes to global warming, which means more air conditioning. And then the whole moving of the mall inside was sort of like a last-ditch construction project, but not one that was sat down and designed from the top up, but actually a natural evolution of the city.
Now, has government completely collapsed? I must apologize, folks, both to Ryan and to you, the listeners. Normally, I've gotten the book and read it, and I just haven't got his book yet. And I'm sure maybe we can project what's going to happen to Canada Post in the future as well. And I'm making a jest, but I didn't get his book, and I apologize to Ryan for that. And therefore, I only have basic notes. So some of the questions I'm going to be asking are probably already answered in the book.
Oh, well, that's fine. Probably most of your listeners haven't read it either, so
but they will.
Place to start, I hope.
So, has government collapsed in the future? Is there no longer a federal government? Is there no longer a municipal government? Are things divided up into sections in the same sense? And I'm thinking Mississauga, downtown Toronto, North York.
Things are divided into sections, and the green section is pretty much what I would call like the suburbs. It's sort of a middle class existence. The red sections are more inner city projects type of thing, without government involvement. And then there's the blue, which you might refer to as a government, but that's basically, it's more like the board of directors than anything, because the mall is run more as a corporation. And it's something I think we see quite a bit in current political life, where the notion of citizenship isn't regarded as highly as the notion of the taxpayer and government officials like the guy we have in Toronto right now, Rob Ford, or Mitt Romney, who's running for the Republican ticket. They seem to think that society can be run like a business, and even though there's absolutely no evidence that it can be. I mean, it never really has in the past much success.
Do you feel that government has a role to play, not only in your book, but also in today's sense, taking care of those that can't take care of themselves? One of the problems I feel with democracy is you're on your own. You're responsible for yourself. That's good and bad, but if you're not able to take care of yourself, either emotionally or physically, what do we do as a society with those individuals that can't do that?
Well, see, I'm torn. I think the government should take should take care of people who are disadvantaged and offer them opportunities. I believe education should be free across the board because I think that would generate all sorts of wealth. My problem is that I don't really trust government to look after people or to have poor people's best interests at heart. I think a lot of times they're more interested in institutionalizing poverty. Every time they want to save money, they'll kind of trot out people on welfare. They don't go to the military. They don't talk about taxing corporations. So while I feel that the government has a role to play in helping poor people, I don't know that it's the best institution to do it. I know that corporations aren't, but I feel like people really have to work amongst themselves in community organizations within their community, not to build a system of handouts, but one of justice instead that will allow people to be educated, work, and contribute.
There has to be a moral fabric that transcends a government, a collective, if you will, a collective of people, that transcends to the individual. And
Indeed.
And I think that's the dilemma that we face every day because, the militaries in the world have at their disposal the technical abilities to feed the world. There's enough food in the world, folks, to feed the world. There's just no political will to do it because the world is divided up into all these little sections, little provinces, little countries, etc., and we want every. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, what I thought was a really good example of that was Haiti, when they had the earthquake, and the military was like, well, we can't drop food on them because it'll hurt someone. But then on the other hand, they tell you they can drop bombs on Iraq without hurting a civilian. Food could have been dropped. I mean, it has to be a lie one way or the other. Either when you blow people up, you kill a lot of innocent people, or you can drop food, with precision. So I don't understand I don't understand how they can not help people when they see it, or what their interest really is in not dropping food, considering how cheap it is compared to like a Tomahawk missile, for example.
It's something that I think has confounded people for years and years and years. And I don't know, I think perhaps our species is far too ego-driven. And I think if we take the ego out of that and perhaps, or leave the ego in because that's not a bad thing sometimes, but perhaps change the focus of it. I often tell my nephew, who I mentioned at Stanford, he's in aerospace there, and I said, that's one of the best things of mankind because it unites the world in a positive venture, not a negative venture. There's lots of arguments, pros and cons for that as well, but I think generally speaking, if you look at it socially, people look at that as moving ahead and not getting stuck in war games, if you will.
Well, this is something I try to get into in the book a little bit, is that to me the most important thing is the relationship in the center of it. And I feel that people I feel like the natural inclination of people is to get along with each other, to be at peace with each other, and to work together and make things better. In order to generate a system of war and violence, it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of advertising. It takes a lot of propaganda. It's not easy to convince people to kill their brother. You have to generate the bulk of your society's resources at that. And I think our society is doing that. Not just through propaganda, but through advertising. I was sitting in a bar the other day with a couple friends of mine, and they made the point, and I think it was accurate. If we were on TV right now, we would be competing about something. We'd be shouting at each other and seeing who was going to be the winner. But that's not how people actually relate to each other. But that's how we're taught to.
for ratings and stuff. Folks, we're speaking with Ryan Oakely. We're getting into some deep subjects tonight, but they are all portrayed very well in his new book called Technicolor Ultra Mall. And you can get that book at www.nightfrightshow.com. Now, this book is set in the future, folks. It happens to be set out in Toronto because that's where Ryan is escaping to us from tonight. But really, it could be any city in the future. And he's taking what's going on now on a social economic aspect, on a political economic aspect, military industrial complex aspect, and he's moved that forward to the future where he hasn't envisioned a complete society that is engulfed, domed over, if you will, in a mall situation. Now, think about that. Living in a mall situation, you've got gangs running around and everything else. Is there a police force? Is there some way to control the good versus evil, if you will? And I want to ask you about characters after as well.
There's a, on the green levels, which would be the middle class, there's like private security firms. And they act as a police force, and their primary interest really is shoplifting, things like that, crimes against property. In the red levels, though there's gangs, I've always felt that they are basically operating as a police force. Some of this was based on a development I saw come out of Brazil where gangs would take over a neighborhood, then find that they have to provide social services and do things like that just to keep the stability. And there's something you see in the history of gangs that does seem to happen. So they run protection rackets, which could be similar to taxation, but they also have a very strict book of rules that they hold to, and they don't like to go outside of it. It's a very bureaucratized sort of gang, which acts as a police force.
Okay.
And often better than ours did during the G20.
How does the military work into the future? Is there a military-industrial complex in the same sense that there is now, or have they disappeared altogether?
No, there's no military in this. In the same, but in some sense, everyone within the book is, I would say, sort of militarized in that the relationships are violent with each other and for gain. The gangs, for example, would be at war with each other, but it's a very inward-looking book. There's not much in terms of foreign policy because with the withering away of the nation-state, it's mainly the same corporations that run each city, and they don't have much interest in going to war with each other.
Is this book act as a mirror for the reader, that the reader holds the book up and asks the reader to look at himself as well, or herself as well?
I hope so. I'm distrustful of things that involve a lot of pointing of fingers and saying the world we live in is someone else's fault. I mean, it is, but it's also our fault. It's also the fault of every member in it. I mean, I can be aware of what's happening in the world, but at the same time I'll buy a computer which is made by slave labor, that the components are taken out of Africa in like terrible conditions, and I'll do that because the society seems designed in order to distance ourselves from the atrocities we commit. It reminds me of Himmler when he went to the front lines. He saw the German troops killing Jewish people and burying them. He threw up in a ditch. He couldn't handle it, and he didn't think the soldiers could either.
That's right.
So he developed the gas chamber system in order to depersonalize the violence, in order for the frame of mind of the German soldiers than for any sort of other reason.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
And I was going to say, I think our society is such a system of levers and button pushing, where we go to the store and buy a product, and it's really difficult as a human being to connect that to a lot of the suffering that's going on in the world. And I think what we have to do is first make that visible, and then trust in the morality of people to correct their behavior, but we're all complicit.
In the book, who are the two main characters that take you through the book? And can we talk about how you built and carved out those characters?
Okay. I guess Budgie would be the lead character, and he's a 15-year-old kid who, in the first scene, sees his best friend stabbed to death in front of him, and starts sort of questioning his relationship to his gang, his society, and trying to make things, trying to change his life. The other main character, I would say, is Harmony, which is sort of an dramatic girl, and I don't want to give too much away about her.
Fair
but
enough.
she connects with Budgie, and they start to develop an actual human sort of relationship with each other. And there's such a variety of characters in the book. There's TV, who is an alpha in Budgie's gang, which means he runs there's Sitcom, who is sort of like a mid-level lieutenant type of character. There's radio hosts as well. There's
Wait, don't tell me he's like God?
Maybe in a way, but not a very good one.
Can I tell you, folks?
There's a lot of advertising written into the book. I feel like the mall and the media are maybe one of the more important characters in the book. You know, there's a ton of like product placement, which will be little ads interspersed that will hopefully give an idea of the society that these people are living in, and as well serving as a parody of our own, I think.
Is the antagonist in the future society itself, and therefore it's also the hero? Is there that type of dichotomy in the future?
I would say when I look at my writing, I have a hard time saying that there's an antagonist or a protagonist or it's this person against that. Everyone in the book has conflicts, and everyone is constrained by the society and a part of it. The people will probably be naturally more sympathetic to the lead character. It's not necessarily the character I'm most sympathetic towards. To me, what's interesting is taking people and making them change and overcome themselves. So to me, the society is feeding into who these people are, but it's the degree to which they get out of that, each one of them, which is, to me, the fundamental conflict. So I would say the antagonist is more, in terms of the book, the antagonist is more whatever character you're reading about. There is them against themselves. In terms of how a person reads a book, I believe they'll very much read that the society they live in is our society, and that is the enemy, if that makes sense.
No, it really does. And, you know, I could extrapolate from that and say I think that's what's happening right now, too, to a certain degree, without question. Why a 15-year-old as the hero, if you will, to drive us through that? Seems to me a 15-year-old may not have the maturity, the savvy to take us through a story of this.
Well, I think in the society of our kind, a 15-year-old might not have the maturity. We live in a good country and a wealthy country.
Very much.
Basically, the effect of that is to insulate you against your own stupidity. You know, if you make a mistake, you can get away with it. In the sort of world he lives in, that's not the case. And I think if you travel to poorer countries and talk to younger people, or even younger people from poorer neighborhoods, in Toronto, you'll find a lot of them have a maturity that you probably won't find in a university, that you might not find in a 30, 40, or 50-year-old. 15 is, you know, to my way of thinking, is old. It's you know, you're still developing physically, but you know, I feel like I had a pretty good grip on what was going on when I was 15. I kind of lost it for a few years there, but you know, you can you can work at 15. And my dad, for example, was from London, and he was at work when he was 15. And my granddad was in the army at 16 in the Second World War. I think we have a tendency to think people are a lot younger than what they are. I feel like 15 is old.
With street smarts as well, I agree with you. There is a maturity there without question. I grew up in an impoverished area in Montreal, and there certainly is an edge without question. Is your granddad still alive?
No, he passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I was going to say, please thank him for his service. Folks, we're speaking with Ryan Oakely tonight. We're talking about Toronto, but Toronto set in the future. We're talking about societal changes that Ryan feels must take place, will probably take place in a scientific background. It's fiction, folks. I want to give you that as well. The book is called Technicolor Ultra Mall, and you can get the book very easily, as always, as with every guest on this show. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest book cover associated with the show, and that'll take you right to a place where you can order this book from the comfort of your own home. It's going to get you thinking, and that's what this show does. I want to get people, I'm going to coin a phrase that's really used too much, outside the box. Think outside the box and get new ideas flowing and new possibilities, because I feel right now one of the biggest victims that you had alluded to before is the lack of value for ideas, and I think that comes with all the availability, the piracy that's going on, books, music, all kinds of entertainment, and that is copyrighted material, but it's more than that. It's ideas, and by stealing those ideas without paying for them, you're saying your ideas have no values, and I think that's a big mistake. I think we have to. Please go ahead.
I would personally disagree with that.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I have a publisher, so they have the copyright, and so I guess I should be sort of careful what I say, but I don't.
If you want to put another book out with this publisher, I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you.
I personally feel like the value of ideas comes not from how much the creator of them gets paid, but from how much they affect people's life, how many people enjoy them, and what is built on top of them. My favorite book is The Odyssey by Homer. Who knows if Homer got paid?
Probably
Who knows
not.
if it was one person? But that doesn't diminish the value of his ideas,
I guess what I'm saying is, as a professional creator, you have a right to make a living off those ideas.
Yeah, but even without piracy, it's still difficult. Like I have to tend bars, serve tables, and wash dishes in order to make a living. If I ever get into a position where my book is being pirated enough so that it's affecting my livelihood, I'm going to be in a pretty good position anyway, because the book will still sell. I view it as being basically a form of free advertising. If most of the books I've read have been recommended to me by friends, and I view that as being the same thing. I'm very much in favor of the sharing of ideas. I think what's happening a lot of times with copyright laws right now is that these companies have failed to adapt to a changing landscape and are now trying to use the law in the state in order to compensate for their bad business model.
No, I think it's. I completely disagree with you on this one, and I don't want to get off on off topic too much. But I'm in the music business.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm doing a television show now is because my music business went down the tubes, and I was trying to figure out why. Why is that? Why is there a composer out there who's composed music for Hollywood feature films, NASA, ABC, CBS, now out of the music business? And I was looking at my sales. And from the advent of the internet, piracy, the sales have been steadily diminishing. Now, it doesn't hurt somebody who's making millions of dollars a year, but the blue-collar guys like me, the guys in the trenches, it's saying that your ideas, your music has no value. Therefore, you're out of business, because how do you justify charging for a product that has no value?
Well, see, I think people have found. I know quite a few blue-collar working musicians, and a lot of them are steady touring. A lot of them run independent labels. A lot of them have moved to vinyl, whose sales have actually increased over the past few years. I think that books might go the same way that the music industry has, and I think the industry is intent on making a lot of the same mistakes that the music industry made. I feel like the content of a book, just the same as with an album, will be easily downloadable and accessible.
But where is the incentive to be a professional writer then? Where is the incentive to be a professional composer if you cannot make a living off of it? Doesn't the art therefore suffer?
Oh, I would say I didn't. I never got into writing with the notion of making a living off it. As a matter of fact, when I wrote Technicolor Ultramall, sort of my avowed goal was to write an unpublishable book. I figured one attacking, sales would be a good place to start, and I write because I'm not really sure why I do it. I think it might be a mental problem of some kind, actually. But I write because I have to.
I've said that a million times.
Yeah.
Being an artist is not something you do, it's who you are.
Yeah. When people look at it and be like, well, I won't be able to make a living from it. I never thought I would be able to make a living from it in the first place.
Why not?
It would be... It's
Don't you deserve that with
dream,
why is that? Why is it a pie in the sky dream? Certainly there are people out there that do it.
There are people out there that do it.
It's very competitive, no question.
It's very competitive. It's very difficult to get published. I feel like people now being able to self-publish maybe stand a slightly better chance than people before, just because there's more people. They'll at least get exposure. As far as making a living goes, I mean, you'll see an anthology that has 15 stories in it have like 450 different submissions, and a lot of them are really good. A lot of it's very difficult to believe that publishing is necessarily a merit-based system if you've seen some of the books that are rejected, or if you've been around books for a while and seen some of the books that have failed, and then you look at something like Twilight, to me, which is just basically emotional pornography, and how successful it is.
Well, there's always been books, movies of that type of thing that you just kind of scratch your head and go, wow, why is that so popular?
I mean, I don't want to badmouth pornography. Let's call it what it is.
Some of my best nights as a teenager were spent. Never mind, folks. We won't go there.
Yeah, we better not get started.
Okay, we got off tangent, folks. I'm going to bring us right back. Ryan Oakely's our guest tonight, and he is full of fresh new ideas, which I think have value. Technicolor Ultramall, and I think you should be a professional writer with quality writing like this, my friend. There's no reason why you shouldn't derive a living off of it. Easy way to get the book, folks, so he can derive a living off this and put out another book, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover, order the book. It's going to really stimulate your imagination and get your own ideas going. And it is ideas, folks, fresh new ideas that are going to solve all our problems, and they will. Think back a few years ago, there was no gay marriage in this country. That was somebody's idea. Think back a few years ago, there was no Medicare. That was somebody's idea. So, we do make it from ideas, but the ideas have to come and they have to retain value, either on a social level or a monetary level, or both. Without question. And I love your idea about free education, by the way. So often, coming from an impoverished home, I got out of university with a $20,000 debt, and it took me over 10 years to pay that sucker off. Now, that's nothing in this day and age. Well, still $20,000, but I know people $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in debt for something that should be a right, just like Medicare is a right. How we would pay for this, we could do it.
Yeah, We could easily.
Absolutely.
It would pay for itself. Education
Bingo.
is the greatest generator of wealth that humanity has ever created. I mean,
That's
you
right.
educate people, and a lot of these so-called problems would be solved pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with you. There's no reason to think that money should not be an obstacle for somebody to gain an education at all. At all.
The other thing I've seen change in my life that kind of goes to the subject matter of the book is the credit card companies giving cards to very, very young people, and encouraging them to spend. Because I've seen people come out of university with a tremendous boatload of debt on that, and it's very easy to look at them and say, "Oh, well, it was stupid. They shouldn't have done it." But when I was that age, if I had a credit card, I think I would have run myself into that much debt down the pub in the course of a couple of days.
You're probably right. Yeah, I don't know why they do that. It's funny, and then they'll put all kinds of crazy limits on you afterwards, and I don't know. I don't understand why the parents would allow their kids to go into debt like that. And oh, look, he's got his own credit card. Next thing you know, $2,000 maxed out on a beer bill or something. Beer run. So there's all that dichotomy in it as well. Is this a world in the future you would want to see your kids grow up and live in?
No.
So this is a warning.
Yeah. Well, it's a warning. I was going to say, kind of like the world today, it sort of depends where you live in that world. I think if you took a Victorian and introduced them to our society, they would think it was a dystopia. If you have money, life is always good. If you don't, it's always bad. It's like if you were king, even though the poorest person in our society today has more wealth, running water, hot water at their command, a greater variety of dietary options than a medieval king, you're probably still better off being the medieval king, funny enough.
Why is that? Why do you feel that?
I think because people measure themselves by the people around them.
Interesting.
I think I don't think the problem is so much how much objective wealth a person has, but the divide between the richest and the poorest in a society. So what I think the sort of world I would like to see, my kids, which I don't plan on having, just in case the wife is watching this, the sort of world I'd like to see is one which is a little bit more equal, not necessarily through the mechanism of socialism, but more equal in opportunity for people and in wealth distribution.
That's why I come back to the free education. I think that would help solve a lot of those problems. It certainly would take out an obstacle of class, if you will, because a lot of people, you get a job primarily, folks, by people you know. And if you're not in a milieu where you don't know the people, and you're in a milieu where you're just going to be in a working class job for the rest of your life, you'll never have that chance to make that leap.
Yeah.
And I think it's few and far between, and that's why I feel that education is a birthright in this nation that is so rich with so many things. I mean, we want for nothing. My biggest decision today, as I'm often saying, is should I have a large coffee or a small coffee? I mean, it's amazing. We have fresh water, we have food. It's amazing country.
It is. But I don't want to say there's anything wrong with working class jobs. I mean,
no, that's not what I was implying. But for people that have a desire to go to space or something like that.
Yeah. What I would say is that when you keep people uneducated, you destroy a lot of minds. How many drug dealers out there are really good at math? How many people are kind of foisted into a life that they're doing damage to society as opposed to one where they could be benefiting it? And I think you'll find that if you look at like global poverty and the amount of people that don't have educations or aren't literate, don't have basic math or computer skills, how many Edisons have we lost? How many Einsteins? That's not even getting into wars. I mean, how many Teslas have been killed in genocides? I mean, we can't allow that to happen anymore. We can't. It's not to put the value of one life above another, but I mean, we're really shooting ourselves in the foot, I think, by doing that.
Whitley Strieber was here, and Whitley Strieber, folks, just do www.nightfrightshow.com. He's the very famous science fiction author. He wrote the book The Day After Tomorrow, The Greys, etc., etc. He had...
I think I stumbled into his hotel room in 1998.
Was that you?
Yeah.
The Visitor. There's a whole story there, and obviously Ryan knows the story. But the Visitor was telling him that during the Holocaust, somebody that was supposed to save the world was killed during the Holocaust, and this ties into what you were just saying. And by the way, folks, the Visitor is somebody that stumbled into Whitley's hotel room in Toronto in 1998 and kind of gave him a synopsis for the future, and was telling Whitley all this stuff during a conversation in his hotel room for about 4 hours or so. The show's there on the Night Fright website anyways if you want to check it out. But the reason why I bring that up is because that's exactly what you just said. How many Einsteins have been lost? How many Teslas? By the way, there's a show on Tesla there too. All these incredible people, and I think it's much to the detriment. Who knows? Maybe we've already lost the person who is going to cure AIDS. Yeah. Who knows, you know? And you're absolutely right. Money should not be detrimental for a person to get an education. And Ryan, I'm going to challenge you right now. Okay. If you run for government, I'll help you out. Okay. You are a smart, articulate, well-read guy with a passion and a vision which is so lacking, as you know, in most of our MPs.
I also have a bit of a past, which I'm afraid some people would have to get over.
It doesn't make you a bad person. Yeah. I think it just adds to your skills as a human being.
Well, I can't say I'm particularly interested in running for government. I forget who said it, but they said the poet is the conscience of the nation, and I feel like it can affect more change.
That's your role, you feel,
through art than you can through bureaucracy.
Okay, fair enough, but I think it's a cop-out. Because I think you could evoke the change you want to see.
I view the 40s as being more a political age anyway, so, give me 7 years and maybe we'll talk again.
And we'll talk again. Okay, fair enough. Folks, our guest tonight, I'm enjoying this because we're talking esoterical thoughts as well as concrete thoughts, new, fresh ideas from Ryan Oakely, our guest tonight. He's via Skype tonight from Toronto, and Toronto, folks, is where his book, Technicolor Ultramall, takes place, and that takes place in the future. And as I said at the outset, folks, just as a joke, as a kind of an icebreaker, no, the Maple Leafs have still not won a Stanley Cup, but the Habs, on the other hand. But that's his next book. He's going to take it. He's going to go to Montreal and have that in the future. Can we talk about bagels for a second? I miss my bagels from Montreal. The book can easily be got, folks, as with all the books for all our guests. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest book cover. That'll take you right to a spot, folks, where you can order this book from the comfort of your own home and be engulfed in these ideas, be engulfed in this new future world. Hold it up and look at it and say, is this the type of world where we're headed? What can I do to maybe evoke some change right now in my own lifetime? I think that's the message that this book sends, and hopefully it'll entertain you while doing that. All good art does that. It represents change, ideas, and evokes thought and dialogue, and hopefully I think we've covered a lot of that tonight. What's next for you? Have you got another book in mind? I was making jest of Montreal before, but...
Yeah, I've written quite a few books since this one. I'm rewriting one now, which will be the next one I try to sell. Technicolor Ultramall I tried to make unpublishable. This one I'm trying to make unreadable, so it should do even better, I hope. I don't want to really discuss it because until I'm done at work, I don't like to get into it too much. But I feel like it sort of deals with some of the same themes, but in a very different way, and almost a more with almost a politics gone and just on a psychological level.
Mm. Where do you see society, our society right now, in a year, in 2 years from now?
Oh, I think that is probably the hardest thing. It's probably the hardest time in the world to predict that, as far as like 1 or 2 years. If I don't even think I can predict what happened last year.
Arab Spring and everything.
Arab Spring,
yeah.
The start of the Occupy movement, the SOPA bills coming up, or that was early this year, being rejected. We're living in a state of such constant transformation. The one thing I would keep an eye on is drones are currently being used all over the world, and people seem pretty caught up in that. What concerns me more is the weaponization of nature itself at this point. There's research being done into basically making cyborg insects that can do surveillance, into having cicadas relaying information. And I think when we weaponize nature, it's going to put the human species into a relationship with the world that it's never been in before, where you won't know whether that bird is an agent or a camera. Like a drone still looks like a drone. When a tree can emit poison gas, you're into a whole different world. And I think that's something that needs to be. I think that's something that is incoming probably a little bit quicker than anyone could hope.
Yeah, then you're into an M. Night Shyamalan book called The Happening, or a movie, I should say.
It'll almost be like it'll be like a schizophrenic reality, which is real, I think, and that terrifies me.
We're gonna have to wrap up, but can you say a few words about Edge Publishing? That's that Canadian publisher I keep coming back to, folks, because they have such amazing authors and intellectual guests as we've just had tonight. Can you say a few words about Edge?
They've been great to work with. My editor, Susan Forrest, she was wonderful. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not the easiest person to work with, and I'm very stubborn, but she put up with me, and she suggested changes to the book that I think really made it much better. Brian is a great guy. I like the publicity department. I'm really happy with the treatment that I've received from them. They're Canada's biggest dedicated publisher of science fiction and fantasy. And if you go back in time and through their Tesseract series, you see a roster of names on there that includes Gibson. That's William Gibson, Margaret Atwood. I think Cory Doctorow edited, Neil Hopkinson. It's a really great Canadian publishing house.
Absolutely, and not just because they're Canadian folks, but they are dynamite without question, and it's something that this country should get behind and exploit, and let the world know the talent that's out there, Canadian talent. And I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today at last minute's notice. That was great. You stepped up to the plate. It's been a real joy. You'll have to come back without question, and we'll continue the dialogue. People can disagree, folks, but still get along, and that's what makes this country and the world a special place for all of us. We've been speaking with Ryan Oakely, Technicolor Ultra Mall. That takes place in the future in Toronto. Great ideas in there, great narrative, something you can relax and read in this cold weather and just put the fire on, the kids are asleep or whatever. Terrific book. Read it on the bus on the way to university. www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover. That'll take you right to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. I'm Brent Holland from Night Fright. Thank you all for listening, and keep the emails coming, folks. See you next time.
Listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio.